Welcome everyone to an In Conversation With. My name is Emma Smith. I'm the project manager with Empowered Conversations, which is a project of Age UK Salford. Absolutely delighted today to be in conversation with Time for Dementia, and we have Dr Stephanie Daley here from Brighton and Sussex Medical School, and also Rohan Charles, who's the project manager with Time for Dementia at the Alzheimer Society. So thank you both so much for giving your time today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us, Emma.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's just because I'm nosy and I want to find out more about what you do. That's why I've invited you today. So welcome if you've come along to watch this webinar. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I think it's at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions at any time, you can drop them in there and we will make sure that we have time to pick those up. Format today is incredibly relaxed, so we're just going to be having a conversation and finding out more about Time for Dementia. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Empowered Conversations. So we deliver communication courses for family caregivers across Greater Manchester. We also offer one-to-one dementia-focused therapeutic support, and then we do these sort of webinars as well every so often to find out more about what other amazing projects are happening around the country and around the world. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to kick off with Stephanie, if that's okay. Can you tell me where Time for Dementia came from, Stephanie?
Yes, of course, Emma. So Time for Dementia really came on the back of the dementia strategy for England. So the idea of Time for Dementia was the sort of recognition really from the dementia strategy that things needed to change in the workplace, and specifically in Kent, Surrey and Sussex. There was something called a dementia skills strategy that was set up really to think about what the workforce needs were coming from the National Dementia Strategy. And there were a number of consultation events with people living with dementia, carers, and also clinicians working with people with dementia. And a couple of ideas came from that. So one was that there was a need, as well as other groups, there was a need to be doing something for professionals in training. So really, as sort of ideas and attitudes were being developed, that would be a really good time to sort of harness them. And the second thing was that within those that consultation that took place, there were ideas about people with dementia and their carers wanting to be involved more directly in educating the future workforce. So because of the timing of these events and the dementia skills strategy that was set up, we were really fortunate to get some money from Health Education England and set the programme up at the Brighton and Sussex Medical School. That was back in 2014, but also the University of Surrey with nursing and paramedic students. So they were both set up at the same time. And I guess we'd say that some of the rest of it is history. It's been very successful, and we've been really fortunate that the programme has expanded across a range of universities and with a lot of different groups of healthcare students, and not just doctors and nurses.
Well, and have you been involved from the beginning?
I have, yes. So I was employed back in 2014 to set the programme up. I worked with Rose's predecessor at the Alzheimer's Society. So since the very beginning, we've worked with the Alzheimer's Society to get the programme going, and it's obviously expanded, and I guess it's probably fair to say that we've learned a lot along the way. There's things that we did at the beginning that we wouldn't do anymore. You know, we've made mistakes along the way, but it's really gone from strength to strength.
Fab. And then, Ro, how long have you been involved?
So I haven't been involved that long compared to Stephanie. I've been at Alzheimer's Society for 11 years, and I moved into this role April 2022. So coming up for sort of 18 months now.
Wow. Okay. So yeah. So Stephanie, 9.5 years-ish. Ro, about a year and a bit.
Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know, if you were going to sum up Time for Dementia sort of in like 2 sentences, how would you describe it?
Okay, I think it's an education programme for healthcare students whereby people with dementia and their carers are the expert teachers. So the students learn directly from the people living with dementia and their carers. Practically, what that means is students go in pairs as a mandatory part of their training to visit a family. So they do about 3 visits a year. They go to the family's home and they get to know the family. The focus is on what it's like to live with dementia, both for the person with dementia and for the carer. And it is about, I mean, essentially it is what it says on the tin. It's about learning about life with dementia, but from the perspective of those with the condition, not from us as sort of lecturers or professionals working with people with dementia. It all comes from the people with dementia themselves teaching our students.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steph. And Ro, how do families get involved in this?
So we have our wonderful team of service user involvement officers, a fabulous title for a job, if ever there was one. And they go out to local groups, they connect with sort of commission services, the memory assessment clinics, the dementia cafes, memory groups, various organisations, and talk about time for dementia. And then I invite families to sort of express an interest, and then they'll go out and see them in their home, spend a long time sort of talking about the programme, do the consent, the sort of bureaucratic side of it, the paperwork, and that's how our families come on board. And very often some of the groups that our team will go to will have families that have already taken part, and they'll stand up and say how amazing it is. And of course the families that have taken part are the best people to sell it for us as an organisation. And the fact they all enjoy and get so much from taking part, it sells itself really.
Brilliant. And I noticed that people can now sort of, doesn't matter if you don't live down south, you can get involved with this if you live further north, because we could use the magic of Zoom to hook you up with students. Is that right?
Ro, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yep. So obviously during COVID, we couldn't have people going into our families' homes. We were on lockdown, so we moved to a virtual delivery, which has continued in some areas. So one of our team will facilitate a group of about 10 students and a family on a sort of a Zoom format. It's slightly more structured because it's being facilitated by a member of staff rather than families just entertaining people in their homes, and that's worked quite well actually. We've found that the students still gain from it and have a sort of an emotional attachment to our families by the end of their sort of 5 or 6 sessions.
That's brilliant. Sorry, I keep putting myself on mute. Someone's knocking at the door. You know that's always going to happen, don't you? As soon as you start recording and you're in a webinar. Fantastic. I love that. You know, it's not everybody can get involved, and that you've sort of come up with a different format to facilitate that, so that, so if you live up here in Salford, you could be involved in this if you're interested in sort of helping to educate students. So that's fantastic. Right, Steph, is this part of the curriculum? Is it sort of compulsory?
Yes, so it is, and that was really important to us at the beginning. So really what Time for Dementia is, it's not about the people who are going to be the future dementia nurses or the future old age psychiatrists. We really want all of our future healthcare workforce to know more about dementia, but also to have the right attitudes. And so at the very beginning, it was a sort of non-negotiable part of our sort of setup that we would only work, or we would only deliver it to universities that would embed it as a sort of mandatory part of the programme. So there have been a couple of similar programmes set up in the States, but they've only been with medical students, and they've only been with students who've wanted to do it. So really like a handful of students, but by making it mandatory, it's really about sort of really giving prominence to the fact that dementia is everybody's business. This is a core requirement, regardless of the area, the clinical area you might work in. But also what it's meant is that, as of this new academic year, we're on 8,000 students who've done the programme. So it means we're really reaching lots and lots of students, and probably students who maybe think that they don't need to know this or it doesn't apply to them, because it's really very difficult to think of an area of healthcare where you don't need to know anything about dementia. It's yeah, that's been really important, and all of the universities that run it here, it's run as a sort of mandatory element.
Fantastic. And is that embedded within sort of a wider dementia study for people? So it's, you know, there's an introduction to dementia and then there's time for dementia. How does that work?
So it's slightly different in different places. So at Brighton Sussex Medical School where I work, it's part of a particular module that runs throughout the training, because it runs over 5 years. So it sits slightly separately from certain other bits of the course. But then there is, so within Time for Dementia, we prepare students for doing the programme. This is everywhere. We prepare students for doing it. We have opportunities for reflection. At the end of the programme, we bring together students and the families taking part to reflect on their learning. So that's the sort of core Time for Dementia bit, but in different universities, it will be set up in different ways. So, for example, at Brighton and Sussex Medical School, we have a separate neuroscience module where a lot of the teaching about dementia is done, as well as separate teaching when students are on rotation. For some of the nursing courses, it's done when the students are out on their clinical placements. I'm trying to think, the University of Surrey does it within a module called long-term conditions. So it's not specific to dementia. So it sort of depends. It has to work well, it has to fit within what the university are doing already. So it sort of depends, that part of it, there is some like local variation depending on how different courses run. But that's how we do it. But there is a sort of core element of the core body of Time for Dementia, which is the sort of same in every university.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Right, I'm going to put you on the spot, Rose. So if you've got 8,000 students who have or will be taking part in Time for Dementia, how many families have you got affected by dementia?
So, I mean, of course, that's over a number of years, but on average, we would halve that. So it's a one pair of students per family for the face-to-face delivery. Obviously, the virtual delivery is slightly different because you'd have maybe 10 students with a family. But yeah, so looking, you would say 4,000 families, but I think we're around the 2,100 mark. Is that right, Stephanie? I think we're currently on.
And just to chip in there, Emma, one of the really great things is that we've got families who are still with us from the beginning of the programme. So often families, I mean, you haven't asked us, and I'm sure Ro can talk more about this, but families like taking part for a number of reasons, and so they tend to stay with us. So their pair of students who've visited will finish their visits and progress on with their training, and then another pair of students will go and see the same family. But obviously things change, don't they? So that maybe they'll have a different experience, there'll be different things going on, but we're really, you know, from our perspective, it's another sign of success that families stay with us, you know, throughout a sort of number of different sort of healthcare student pairs visiting.
And I read, so the pairing sort of, is it a 2-year period that you sort of pair people? Yeah. So 2 years, and then you've got your visits. So you've got 6 visits happening if it's face-to-face within a 2-year period. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that similar to the online offer, Ro?
Yes, it's similar. I mean, some universities will do 5 visits, it varies, but overall, yeah, the sort of the virtual will try and follow the same model with 6 visits.
And you, oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I should let you ask me questions. I'm keen to tell you things, but I guess I was just to say, over 2 years, you can imagine that things are happening, and that might not just be, there might be things going on for the carer, and that has an impact for the family. Things might change for the person with you know, the severity of their dementia, but there might be other things going on. But also the students are progressing through their studies, so they get more confident, they have more exposure, they have more exposure generally to people with dementia in their training. And the family's often quite interested in what the students are doing. You know, there's a sort of two-way sharing of information. So everybody changes in that time. It's not a static, you see them once and that's how it is. It's sort of, which is of course the reality of life. Things move on, don't they? And things change. And there are different challenges or different opportunities at different times. So
from listening to you both and from having a bit of a read around, it feels very much that the relationship is like the key here. It's that relationship, it's that connection between student and families affected by dementia that really, I guess if you dug into that with any sort of qualitative or quantitative research, it'd be that relationship that holds people and really sort of keeps that connection going. Ro, other than, if I'm thinking about families now and who might get involved in this, so what would bring a family into being involved in this program?
I think it varies for people. Sometimes it could be because they've had particularly difficult experiences with healthcare professionals, so they want to change that, because this is about changing the future of healthcare. Having a group of people that are more aware and understanding. So that would be a motivation for some people. For others, it's wanting to give something back, wanting to have a sense of purpose, still feel useful, and just the opportunity to share their experience and their knowledge. And they like having the students come out. It's a sort of social stimulation as well. That sort of element to it, that they get used to them coming. They enjoy having them, which is why families stay in the programme. When one set of students is finished, then like, oh yes, no, I'll have a new set, please. Thank you very much. It's been lovely. It's been really nice. It can be quite stimulating for the person who's got the diagnosis as well. So if someone sort of come out, take an interest, take time to get to know them, see them as a person. So multiple benefits.
And I hope you've done a little award for the families who have been in the programme the longest. Like you might have had someone who's gone through this 4 or 5 times now. Maybe they're in their 5th time.
Well, we've got a few that do that. We've just this current academic year, we'll be on our 10th cohort of students at Brighton Sussex Medical School. And so we're doing a number of events to sort of mark that. But one of the things we've done is look at the families who are still with us. And we do have 2 families who are still with us from that original cohort. And we're, we want to, we definitely are going back to talk to them about their experiences in that time, as well as some of our students who were with us at the very beginning, who obviously are out in practice now and working as doctors.
And that was going to be sort of my next question. Was
you
around,
lost me there, I think, perhaps.
I think we just lost you on the very last word, but you basically said that you're going to get back in touch with those students who were sort of in that first cohort with you. Oh, we've lost Stephanie for a second. Okay, there's a question come in. How do you promote diversity to break down stigma in Black people so that...
Yes, that's right.
Are you back with us, Steph? I'm going to come to you.
I am. I tell you all the time.
Oh, have you? All right, fine, fair enough. All right, well, we've got a question from Kelvin. It says, how do you promote diversity to break down stigma in Black people so that they know they will be treated equally in dementia? I'm going to bring that. Come to you first, Rowan, on that one, if that's okay, and then to you, Steph.
It's a really good question, and it's a challenging question, because we know that there are sort of differences in terms of different groups of people who will connect with organisations and are visible. So obviously we are all about equality and diversity and trying to reach as many people as possible as an organisation, Alzheimer Society itself, and for Time for Dementia as well. We want to sort of achieve sort of more sort of a more diverse range of families. So we, as an organisation, we're reaching out to communities and different organisations and kind of just building relationships and sort of having sort of honest conversations, and hopefully people feel more comfortable in engaging with services and organisations like ourselves, and then taking part in Time for Dementia. But for us as an organisation, and I think also for myself, is that everybody is equal. We would never discriminate. Dementia is a very challenging condition. It's a progressive terminal condition, so that brings its own challenges. And I think the more people that kind of recognise it in that way, and then we can sort of and then tap into what's available and support networks, the better. And for a long time, people haven't looked at it in that way at all. in various different societies and groups. So we are about trying to break down those barriers and say, everyone, look, this is a progressive terminal condition. It's a disease. It's not a natural part of aging, and there is support available and things that that you can tap into.
Thanks, Rowan. Stephanie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of what Rose said, and I think I guess the emphasis is on us to be more creative about finding families from different communities, because our students are pretty diverse overall, and we want them to have experience of learning about dementia from the sort of that's reflective of wider society, because otherwise there's a risk that those sort of inequality, or the particularly health inequalities, persist, and that people from more diverse backgrounds don't get that opportunity to influence and share their experience. So it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling thing. So we are, Rose's been talking about some of the work that she's been doing. We've been putting in some bids so we can be, really proactively look at a target. I use the word targeting, but really look at how we engage with different groups and have more representativeness, so that we do. But I guess the emphasis is on us to work differently to recruit people to the programme from different backgrounds.
Brilliant. Now, this might be a silly question because your student numbers are so high, but is there an element of matching with families?
So the matching is done pretty much on geography. Do the students have to be in certain locations for their training? Are the students car drivers or not? Okay. Do they have animal, are they phobic about animals? So the answer is no. I mean, it's a practical task. The program I mentioned that run in the States, they're very small, and they do look for people with shared interest and match on that basis. But we just can't do that with the sort of numbers that we've got. It's just not possible. So it is. We do. Well, I don't know, Ro, you might want to talk about the work that your team do in trying to find out, thinking about finding out about the person's history and what's shared with the students to help with that building of the relationship.
I mean, our team find out quite a lot about the people when they go out and spend a few hours in their home. But we don't want to give too much away, because we want our students to develop the relationship and find that information out organically. So they'll be given very basic information. And one of the most important elements that we give them is the diagnosis, the type of dementia of the family they'll be visiting. And we do ask that they research that, because dementia progresses in different ways and impacts upon people differently depending on the type of dementia it is. But we refrain from giving too much information, and obviously we get the basics. So if it's accessible, if it's fully accessible for steps, if there are animals, if things like that, so will obviously have to be taken into consideration. But otherwise, it is on a geographical basis. We get given a target catchment area by our university, and we recruit within that area, and then it's down to the admins to kind of make it all work, make the magic happen.
Which is a massive task when you look at the numbers, isn't it? It's not like, I've got 10 people and 5 students, or whatever. It's a huge task.
Yeah, our administrators are the glue that holds the whole program together. We couldn't, we really couldn't do it without them, because it is them who do all that and communicate with the students, communicate with the families, and just make it all work really smoothly.
How many is in the team? So obviously you've got some over with you, Stephanie, and some over with you, Ro, at the Alzheimer Society. How big's this team?
Your team if Ro's team is the biggest team.
So we're currently at 14. So we have a big manager to praise. Myself and Lauren are the project managers, and we have a coordinator, and then we have our service user involvement officers who are all over sort of southern England. Depending on which university they kind of recruit for.
And we on the academic, so if we say we're on the academic side, there's 5 of us, so we're involved in the research, thinking about the sort of university interface. We work very closely with Professor Shubhi Banerjee, who was the original sort of instigator of Time for Dementia, and so he also sort of works really closely with us all, both with Ro myself. So collectively, we're a team. I'm thinking about some of your wider. There's about 20 of us quite involved in Time for Dementia, as well as the universities. Obviously we now have a network of teaching staff and teaching colleagues who are delivering Time for Dementia with their students, and administrators in the different sites. So I hadn't noticed asked us that before, but I think if we looked at the whole, we added we're probably near a group of about 40 of us all together involved in Time for Dementia in some way.
Fantastic. Wow, big team. So if we think about like the research behind this, because obviously that's going to be quite a key element. So I've had a little mooch around and I've seen some research. So I know that it's the most recent piece of research about sort of the families and what they get out of being involved in Time for Dementia. Is that right?
Yeah. So would it be helpful for me to tell you what we've found about the different groups of people taking part?
That would be helpful.
So we have, as I think we alluded to earlier, but we've done a couple of bits of research with the families taking part. We did some earlier work to find out broadly about their experience and their motivation to take part. And I think, as Rose said, often people take part because they've had poor experiences themselves, or they really want to do something for other people, sort of feeling that they're making a difference, feeling that they're contributing is really a key factor, as is having, enjoying the social element of having students visit. And I think sometimes there's something nice about having younger people visit, not always, but often older people. So a different, bringing that different perspective. For carers, it's often been really positive for them to be able to share their experiences. And as I think you touched on, there is something about the fit between the students and the families, that really makes a sort of key difference. We've recently just published a paper where we looked at the satisfaction of taking part in the programme. So, and overall, we saw that was really high in both the person with dementia and the carer. And it was something that people got value from. They would recommend it to other people, peers or friends or other people living with dementia. So that was really positive for us to know, because obviously at the very beginning, we just wanted to make sure that we didn't do harm. But it does seem like the programme brings maybe unexpected benefits to the families taking part. Other research that we've done a couple of it. I mean, at the beginning, we were, really interested in understanding its impact on students. So we've done a couple of qualitative studies. We have done some qualitative studies, but I might start with a quantitative. So that's looking at numbers and questionnaires where we look at what students know about dementia before they do the programme, or look at their attitudes and then look at it again at the end. And we've looked specifically at medical students, but we've also looked at the wider group of students. And what we see when we've looked at our students doing Time for Dementia, we've compared them to other similar students, the same students not doing Time for Dementia, either at other universities or in other, previous year groups. What we see is that the students doing the programme learn more and have better attitudes about dementia at the end of the programme compared to the students who don't. So all students will have some exposure to dementia when they train, but I guess what we've seen from our results is that they learn much more, have much more positive attitudes from doing the programme. The other things that we've seen in terms of when we've looked qualitatively, so we've had focus groups and we've had individual interviews with students, is that we've talked about this relational learning. They learn in the context of this meaningful and real relationship with a family that develops over time. That's a key factor. Their understanding is much broader about dementia. They understand particularly the role and the needs of carers. They also are able to think beyond just sort of medical treatments and think about the other things that help people to manage. Their attitudes are challenged, and often students unfortunately have pretty negative attitudes towards dementia. Often when people don't know, then they might just have an image that's maybe a bit stereotypical and quite negative. So this Time for Dementia challenges that. And finally, what they've told us is that doing Time for Dementia impacts on their practice, their clinical practice. They're more confident, they can communicate better with people with dementia, they're more patient, they're aware of things that might make a difference, like things like This Is Me booklet, where you might find out about somebody when they're in hospital, so you know what their preferences are. So they've really talked about really practical but real changes to their practice as a result of doing the programme.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Jonathan's got a question, but before I go to it, I just want to ask one more question, research related. And it's sort of thinking the longitudinal change, because obviously you sort of measure before and after the student goes on the 2-year placement, and then they might go off and they'll, you know, they're a doctor, or they're over here, or they're over there doing something else. Do we ever get back to those students? Well, once they're professionals, do we ever find out the sort of, so what? You know, how is practice changed when they're out in the wide world of?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And so what we've just put in a bid for a research project to follow up. We have about, I'm just trying to think of the exact number, probably near to sort of 3,000 students who've fully completed the programme and been part of the research. So in the research proposal or research bid, we want to follow those students up into practice and answer those questions, because obviously that's what matters at the end of the day. You know, does this make any difference to what they do? You know, we thought sometimes, what is it, from bench to bedside, but you know, this is only any good if it means we believe that future healthcare professionals will be better for having done Time for Dementia, but obviously we do need to prove that. So we're waiting to hear about the outcome of that bid. But we have actually this year, because we're doing the celebratory 10 years of Time for Dementia at Brighton Sussex Medical School, and we have followed up a few of our ex-medical students who are now in practice, and in fact they have corroborated that. They have talked about the difference it made to them, and how much it's really been interesting how much they've retained. You know, because we're talking now, for some of them, that's nearly coming up to 7-8 years ago, but that how powerful it is that it stayed with them and how it's influenced their practice. But we want to look at this more systematically. Oh,
that's going to be really exciting. You'll have to come back on and tell us when you do that piece of work and come back on. But I mean, it comes back to, you know, the reason they hold on to that is because it's around the relationship. It's a connection, isn't it? It's not just a textbook or someone telling them something. It's the real sort of connection with people with lived experience. Okay, so Jonathan, I'm so sorry that you had problems when you first came on, but Jonathan's question is, if a visit happens and they come across someone who's having some problems at the time of the visit, what happens then? Ro, what are the steps for supporting those families?
Okay, so firstly, the person with dementia is never on their own during the visit. There will be a carer present as well. So for obviously safeguarding issues, there's always 2 people, and the students are always in pairs or trio, so they're not on their own. It would depend on what the problem is. Obviously, if it's a real emergency, then we would ask them to phone 999. If it's something that they're concerned about, maybe from a welfare perspective, a safeguarding perspective, or just general lack of support, then we would ask the students. In fact, we make it very clear that they need to come back to Alzheimer Society. The family's well-being is our responsibility, and then we will follow up, be it with if it's a safeguarding, obviously we'll go down the safeguarding route. If it's a lack of support, then we'll get in touch with the family. We'll see what the issues are. The service user involvement officers that recruit the families also develop relationships with them, so they'll know them really well. So they might ring them up and say, how's it going? I understand something wasn't right. You know, what can we do? What do you need? What are you struggling with? And then we'll find them the right support. And so we're there to support our families in whatever way they need, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ro. Okay. So this is putting you on the spot all the time today. I'm sorry. I want really that standout story. Ro, it's going to be loads easier for you because you've got less time to think of like what your standout story. Steph's got to go back like 10 years. She's got to think, in the last 10 years, my number one standout story. So yeah, standout story from, I guess, from the student's perspective and also from the family perspective. Ro, you go first.
Okay.
We'll give Steph a bit more time to think.
I kind of am going to struggle with this. So I think I haven't got lots of experience. I did actually take part in Time for Dementia as a family myself a few years ago with my father-in-law, and I think it was really nice having that opportunity to talk to students and have them to come out and sort of share our experiences and feel valued, that we had value, what we were experiencing had value. So that's nice. And I think for me, I was at an introductory session last week at the university, and it's a very light touch, the introductory session. So we're just talking to second year nursing students, just to say Time for Dementia is something that you're going to be taking part in. This is what it is, and we'll talk about it more in a bit nearer to the time. And we were doing questions, and the student put her hand up, and so when we went to her, she said, "I haven't got a question." She said, "I just want to say I think this is amazing, and I'm really excited, and I'm so grateful I'm going to get to be a part of it." And I think that, to me, is wonderful. If students are feeling that before they even start the program, then they're going to be so open to engaging and learning and getting the maximum from it. And that's wonderful. That's what it's all about, isn't it, for us?
Brilliant. Thank you, Ro. Is that giving you enough time, Stephanie?
Yeah, this is really frustrating because I'm sure there's loads of really brilliant, but I can think of two examples and a general example. But the two examples, and I almost alluded to this, but it was a real, it's happened more than once. But I can think of a student in that very first cohort the very first group of students at the medical school who did the program, and we actually did a sort of follow-up with her and the family that she visited about a year after her last Time for Dementia visit. So she was, in it at the very beginning. And she said that she'd been on a ward, so a ward for elderly people. And there were lots of sort of people with dementia on the ward, some of whom were quite distressed and were calling out. And she said that I thought to myself before doing, I'm going to call him something else, what would John do now? What would John, and I know what John would tell. John would tell me to go over to that man and to see him. And for me, that was sort of like magic. I can think of a time where we had another student who went to visit somebody in a care home, which is not that typical. Sometimes families, the person with dementia goes into a care home and the students will follow up, but it's quite unusual to do it from the beginning. But the family were really keen to take part and the care home were keen. And the student just had this brilliant experience. And the person with dementia, her dementia was very advanced. She was quite bedbound. But the student would go and visit the woman with dementia, and she would read poetry to her. And so actually, so I happened to see some of that by chance because it was a care home. I saw it, so it was really incredibly moving. But at the end of it, the student's reflection wasn't really about anything medical. It was firstly, people can communicate so much more than you know. But her second reflection was about love and what love can do. And, it sort of I'm probably not conveying it well now, but it's, we can't teach those things. They're really powerful and they're really real. And I think that's always our reflection, that students are getting things we can't teach. We at the medical school and at other universities, we have an annual stakeholder conference where our students come, our families come, and we break them into mixed groups and ask them to share experiences. And just being the fly on the wall, the sort of we're the facilitators, Ro's a facilitator. We're not the ones sharing because it's not our experience, it's their experience. But that's really very moving and really powerful, really, really powerful. So I guess it's that hearing that it's done what we want it to do, for me, is the sort of, the standout stuff.
Yeah, and we had that lovely story of the family that called out an ambulance for the person with dementia, and when the paramedics came and sort of dealt with them, one of the family members said, "Oh, you know, you're really good. You're really good with our person with dementia." And they said, "Oh, that's because I took part in the Time for Dementia programme."
Hey,
so, that's it for us.
That's what we want.
That's
our
job done.
evidence.
It is proper job done. Drop the mic. There you go. Walk away. That's all you need, isn't it? Right. I'm just going to alert everyone. So we're in our last sort of 10, 15 minutes. So if you have a question for Stephanie or for Ro, please whack it in now. I've got a few more questions, but I don't want you to miss this opportunity. So if you have something that's in your head and you want to find out a little bit more about, please put it in the Q&A now. Okay. So you're down south. How many? You're at 7 universities. Is that right?
9.
9. You're at 9 universities, right? How are you coming up north? What's going on there? How's that going to happen?
So we're actively trying to identify ways of funding the expansion of the programme. We are really, really keen to move out of the south. I mean, we want to stay in the south, but we want to expand. We don't want to move out of the south. We want to expand, and we would really like to be working in, because this is not a southern thing. It's just that's where it started, and that's where we had the money and the sort of idea of doing it. But it definitely would clearly work in universities anywhere across the UK, and we've been talking to some universities out in the north of the country. So it's really about, it's a tricky time for universities, so we have to really we need to find the funding to get this started. So that's what, that's our job at the moment. To Brez, who can't be here today, that's pretty much his full-time job, to sort of help us to do that. So we hope, if you come back and talk to us in a year's time, we would really want to be saying, well, actually, in the last year, we've started working with colleagues up in the north of the country. That would be brilliant from our perspective.
And just from a really boring project perspective, Ro, would your team just expand down there to facilitate that, or would you look to sort of have people up north who are working on this? How would you do it?
We would look to recruit in the areas. So we would look to recruit sort of whatever university came on board, we would look to recruit a team member in that area. Obviously, we'll be supporting them. We'll go up, they'll shadow us. And eventually, who knows, maybe we'll have multiple project managers across the country, depending on how big we grow. But we would be looking to take on new people.
Fantastic. Oh, well, fingers crossed for that, because that just sounds, it's such a good project. It just feels like it just needs to be mainstream, doesn't it? It just needs to be at every university so that students have this experience, so that we get that change. I mean, you're seeing the change down south, with that paramedic. I've been on the Time for Dementia, but you want that change coming through, don't you? Because otherwise we just always end up in the same situation. But it really feels like working with the workforce of the future is the way forward. Right, this is my final question for you, and it's around the unexpected outcomes from this work. So what were you not expecting to happen that did happen? I'll start with Steph.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So we've touched on some of this, is that we didn't set it up for people with it, in the sense that we thought that it would be of benefit to the people with dementia and their carers taking part. So that's a really unexpected but really brilliant benefit, that it's something that's really enjoyable, and we think it's really pretty good for people, because it does give a sense of purpose. And that's certainly something we'd like to evaluate and research more of, is it sort of something that is good for people? People should be doing it routinely. I think the other thing maybe I didn't see as at the beginning was a sort of intergenerational project, that you've got typically students in their 20s and typically maybe people in their 70s and 80s coming together with this shared purpose. So that's unexpected. And I guess the final thing is that at Brighton Sussex Medical School, we've on the back of Time for Dementia, we've developed a new program called Time for Autism, where students see a family with an autistic child. So the idea that this model, if we call it a model, which is can be taken to different conditions and different health challenges. So So that certainly wasn't our thinking at the beginning. It wasn't, we set it up in 2 universities. I don't think we thought we'd have a team of nearly 40 people in the beginning. So the sort of scale of its expansion has sort of been unexpected, I think.
Amazing. And I suppose that model, it could go anywhere, couldn't it? With any conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ro, I'm coming over to you. Anything unexpected that you've sort of come across since you've been project managing?
I think just how much our families get from it, and how the genuine relationships that develop between the families and students, and how the families become really passionate about the project and wanting to encourage and support. Word of mouth is great in terms of families recruiting families, really. But also it means something to people. It's not just something that they've chosen to do. It's a pure example of involvement. But it is more than just being involved with something. It's something that people are genuinely passionate about, and feel it's got a really good purpose. And that's just it's a great thing to be part of.
It sounds, it absolutely shines the way you both have talked about it today. Right. Apologies for people. This is my first time on this new platform, so I'm just going to launch a survey now. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but let's just see. Okay. Hopefully that's just going to happen now. So we're going to get your feedback on how you found today's talk. We've got something from Kim. She said, waiting for a memory clinic referral. I don't have a diagnosis as to why I've not, as to why I've been having cognitive decline for 8 to 10 years, but I'm only in my 50s. It's been frustrating to get people to take my concerns seriously. Probably you need families with a member who is formally diagnosed. Is that right? Coming over to you, Ro. Do you have to have a diagnosis to be involved in this program?
Unfortunately, we do need a formal diagnosis. Yes, just because we have to be able to give the students the type of dementia that the person's living with. But I can understand that must be really frustrating, and hopefully this person will get some answers very soon. I know it's taken around 2 years on average now for people to be diagnosed. It's one of Alzheimer Society's big complaints and big campaigns that we need to be pushing diagnosis as a priority for people.
Yeah, I think coming out of COVID as well, it's just not really caught up, has it? Certainly up in Greater Manchester, and I imagine that's reflective everywhere, that people are just stacked out and it's really difficult to get diagnosis. And yeah, the whole system feels very slow at the moment, which is massively frustrating. But obviously the Alzheimer's Society can support people pre-diagnosis.
Absolutely. We're more than happy for people to reach out to us before they have a diagnosis. And I would encourage anybody that's in that situation to look for what support is available. And hopefully you'll get a diagnosis soon. We are pushing. We know that there's, people go to the doctor with concerns about cancer. There's supposed to be a 6-week turnaround. We need something for people with potential dementia to have a similar sort of turnaround.
Massively, Ro. Thank you. Kim said thank you. That's understandable. Brilliant. Does anybody have a last minute question or something that you want to add before we say thank you to Stephanie and to Ro for today's talk? Somebody's writing. Yeah, I've just found it absolutely fascinating, and I'm so excited. And if there's anything we can do up here in Greater Manchester to support your work in terms of connecting you up to universities and people, then we're really happy to do that. Someone might be typing something really long. I hope it's been okay. Has this platform been okay for you, Steph and Ro?
Yeah, it's great. I think I've frozen a few times though, but that's probably my connection, isn't it? So
yeah, normally as soon as I start anything like this, my internet starts saying going very slow, and you're like, no, don't be going slow. Oh, so we've got some lovely comments. So Leslie, thank you. Really informative, brilliant program, and Kim, very encouraging. Like that is for all students, not just who know they will work with dementia. Yeah, so all students. Yeah, it's massively important, isn't it? Brilliant. Okay, well, I am going to bring our webinar to a close, and I'm going to say thank you once again, Ro, and thank you, Stephanie, for your time today. It's been brilliant and fascinating to find out more, and it feels like we need to do this in a year's time to see where you're at.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us both on here.
You're very welcome. All right. Well, I hope that you have a lovely Wednesday afternoon, and yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for coming along to watch.